Give them nothing, but take from them everything.
And welcome back to the Metal Hand of God podcast. I am your host, Wayne, and this lovely gentleman with me today is...
the Rum Guy.
Of course. And today we have a very special guest coming from a long distance. The man himself, Mr. David Fielding. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Sorry about that. I've been having this, with all the sicknesses that are going on around these days. I have actually got bronchitis, so I've been dealing with throat issues and this and that. So sorry if I stumbled.
That's all right.
But Mr. David Fielding is known for being Zordon on the Power Rangers, and just so you know, man, that's super freaking cool. I mean, it really, really is, man. Like,
Wayne has been a huge Power Rangers fan forever.
Yeah, dude.
Ever since I've known him, so it's amazing, and I remember watching it too. So it was, and I was like, Zordon. Why do I know that name? I was like, he was the big head.
Yeah.
Are you both ready to teleport to the command center?
Yes, dude. That's so good. That's so awesome. Oh,
But
man.
It's amazing because we know you from that, but you've had a long career.
Yes.
Doing
yeah.
many things. And I understand you now have a book out, which I'm interested to talk to you about too. I'd like to hear that right out the gate. I want to know about this book.
Sure. The book was published by Caffeine and Ink. They're a small independent publisher. The title of the book is Glims, a Lincoln Bright novel, which tells the first installment of the character Lincoln Bright. Lincoln Bright is an attuned, and what that means is that he can see and hear things that other people can't. What most of us would understand to be like ghosts or phantoms, he refers to as glims, and these are the leftover negative baggage that some people leave behind when they pass away.
Whoa, that's cool.
These glims are anchored to someone else in the real world that they sort of feed off of, and Lincoln has taken upon himself to sort of shut these things down, because if he doesn't, they create holes in the world where other nasty things can crawl through and start to eat and devour people. So he is sort of, fighting a losing battle against because so many people die all over the place. He has to jump from point to point to try to shut these things down. And the first novel basically concerns himself being introduced to a young autistic boy named Petey, who is 14 years old and who is exactly like Lincoln. He can see and hear these things too. So Lincoln not only has to sort of protect this young boy, he also sort of has to sort of like ease him into the world that he now lives in. So
That's amazing.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Like, really, like that's kind of stuff that me and Rum are actually into reading and get into.
I would love to read this.
Yeah.
sure.
Like,
What?
ghost stuff and the paranormal, and not only that, but like, other things like Bigfoot, scary stuff like that.
Yeah, I can send you the link to where you guys can take a look at it or whatever.
Sweet.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. We would appreciate that a lot.
But this is wow. I wasn't expecting this type of. I mean, how did this come to be? I mean, with this type of storyline, how long did this take you to come into? I mean,
I've been writing since I was like 11. I read a whole lot when I was growing up. Started reading when I was like 3 or 4, and just really gravitated towards all kinds of stories, really. But I read a lot of Greek myths and pulp stories like The Shadow and Tarzan of the Apes and
Nice.
Warlord of Mars and all that pulp stuff. And then from there, I moved on into fantasy novels, Lord of the Rings, the Thomas Covenant novels, just a bunch of fantasy stuff. And then, of course, around that time, around the time I was like 16, 17, I started playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. And
What?
yeah. Yeah, shocked. And sort of exploring that new sort of way of telling stories of this interactive medium where, you know, people can add to or detract from the story based on their actions. And then also at the same time, I was very into Stephen King and Dean Koontz and all these sort of horror writers, Clive Barker. So all this stuff was like getting stored into the back of my brain. You know, I would just soak it up like a sponge.
Right.
And I always fooled around with writing, but never really got serious about it until about 10 years ago. Because after I left Hollywood, I moved back to the East Coast and got involved in the video game industry, doing voices for video games and then writing for video games, writing hint books and the clue manuals and stuff that would go for these video games. And then I got hired to do quality assurance testing or QA testing for video games. And then from there, I moved into design and did level building and level design and quest design for video games. And so I was like honing all this sort of like tools, and it seems to, at least from my perspective, it seemed to take a really long time before I got to the point where I felt like, well, I should really start to try to put stuff out there.
Right.
And about 10 years ago, I started submitting stories to anthologies that were looking for all a variety of different stuff. So I submitted superhero stories, I submitted steampunk stories, some paranormal stories. I got published by Delta Green, which was Delta Green is an imprint of I think Chaosium, or it was Chaosium.
Oh,
they did,
okay, yeah.
The H.P. Lovecraft stuff, and Delta Green was sort of like their modern day take on high tech versus the Eldritch horrors and all that kind of stuff. So I was really excited to be published by them.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And I self-published a superhero novel called Vigilance, and then just kept submitting stuff. Source Point Press was a great boon for me because they published a couple of chapters from my superhero novel, and then they put out a book called Oddities that I did, which was a trilogy of short novels or novellas, 3 novellas in that book. And then in 2013, I just had this story idea with this character named Lincoln Bright, who could see and hear these things that other people couldn't, and spent about 3 or 4 months really sort of developing and honing that short story, which was called Buddy Holly in the Cold, Cold Ground. And that was published by a small publishing company that unfortunately went under, and you can no longer get that version of it. But that short novella, Buddy Holly in the Cold, Cold Ground, is included with Oddities, put out by Short Press. And that's really where the birth of the character came. And then I had an idea for a longer version, a story. And through a mutual acquaintance, I got partnered up with Caffeine and Ink. And they worked with me to edit it and to get it down into a really enjoyable read. And it came out on February 14th of this year.
Wow, man. That is incredible. I mean, you just told us this, and it's like, this is what I heard. So I started off awesome, and I just got more awesome. and then all of a sudden, bam, guess what? I'm awesomer. That's even a thing.
Awesomer. Yeah, okay. Way to go.
This is amazing. I mean, it's you have done so much.
Yeah, man, you've been working your ass off, dude.
Holy cow.
It's funny that you put it that way, because from my perspective, I'm like, man, I'm not getting anywhere. So it's really nice to hear somebody say, "Wow, you're awesome." And I'm like, "Well, thank you very much."
Yeah, man.
Yes,
That's
please.
that's impressive.
Definitely a compliment.
Yeah,
Because that is amazing. I mean, when you when you started this journey, when you were that kid, just reading those books and sitting around, when you're in school, and you're like, God, what am I gonna do when I grow up? Is this the track you thought you were taking?
Not at first, no, because when I was in the 5th grade, I wanted to be a highway patrolman.
Oh wow.
I wanted to be a policeman. My friend though, Steve, told me, he goes, policemen get shot, and I'm like, oh, that's right.
Oh,
Well,
I think I'm gonna change my mind now.
I said, well, maybe I'll play one on TV, and
There
that
you
way,
go.
if I get shot on TV, I could be a doctor the next week, and so that's sort of like was the springboard for my interest into acting and performing.
Man, that's
Well, that's amazing. Absolutely. And then through all this, through this thing, somehow you got involved, and we've got to go there. You
of course.
got involved with Power Rangers,
Right.
but how did I'm going. I asked Wayne earlier. I'm like, wasn't it it was a Japanese company, wasn't it?
Well, the origins of Power Rangers is very interesting. If you have the time, check out the Netflix show, The Toys That Made Us. There's a
Oh, I saw that, but I didn't watch it yet.
yeah, it's an episode all about the Power Rangers toys, because Power Rangers grew out of the Japanese television show Super Sentai. Super Sentai is something that started like in, I think, 1974.
Yeah, I think you're right.
The tokusatsu, which is basically special effects. Basically, it's a hero who transforms. He says a power word or code word or whatever, and he transforms into the super being who has powers that he normally wouldn't have. And that's been going on since like 1974. And very much like the musical group Menudo, they changed casts. They change cast every year or every season or whatever. And so by the time that Haim Saban saw it in the early to mid 80s, it had been going on for quite some time. And Haim saw it, and he thought it was wonderful. He thought, well, there has to be a way for this to translate to the American audience, because this is a gold mine. And so in the mid to late 80s, he started to work on a pilot called Bioman. And I believe Mark Dacascos, who was in the John Wick Chapter 3, he played Zero, the bald guy.
Oh, okay.
Great actor, a wonderful, wonderful guy. He was the lead in that. And they shot a pilot called Bioman, and none of the studios picked it up. None of them really understood it. Huh. And but the episode of The Toys That Made Us goes into the whole history of that. And the woman who's, I can't remember her name, who understood exactly what Haim was going for, and she took the chance. She was, I think, the head of programming for Fox Kids at that time. And so they took a chance. And so in the summer of 1992, I had just wrapped up my MFA program at the University of Pittsburgh and had moved out to California. Before that, I had gone to my undergrad was at Southwest Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas, and I had made a great deal of friends there, and a lot of those friends had moved to California ahead of me. I had chose to go to the University of Pittsburgh to get my Master of Fine Arts in acting, and so I spent 3 more years studying before I moved out to California. And in the summer of '92, I moved out and had been living there for a couple of months when I got a call from a friend from my school days in Texas, who was working on the production team of this pilot for this kids' TV show that they were shooting. And she said, "Would you like to audition for it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure. That's why I'm out here."
Yeah, why not?
I thought it was going to be a cattle call. I thought I would go down to a building and there would be 15,000 other guys. I'd go in, I'd read my lines, do my 2-minute take on the camera, go home and never hear anything.
Right.
But when I got home, when I got to the Saban building that afternoon or evening, it was just me and another guy. And they told us, hey, we're going to cast it tonight, and we're going to shoot it next week. And I was like, wow, that's really unusual. That's really fast. And I came to find out that they had already been filming the pilot. They had done a number of weeks of filming. And the scene for Zordon, or Zoltar at the time, he was called Zoltar.
Zoltar.
That was going to be the last shot of the shoot. They were going to shoot it like on a Wednesday or Tuesday or whatever. And I said, yeah, okay, sure. And the only direction I was given for the monologue was that you're a 10,000-year-old wizard. You're trapped in a time warp. Go.
Nice.
And they basically had the monologue that Zordon reads in the first episode about all of them, their different traits and
their powers and different all that
powers and stuff. So the first gentleman goes into the room and they close the door, and I'm sitting out the lobby, just going over my lines, trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. And I could hear him, rehearsing in the opposite corner from me, and he was going through this really sort of weird, kind of a high-pitched take. He was like, Power Rangers, and I was like, I don't really know if that's the kind of tact you want to take with that. So I went the opposite direction, and after he'd been in there for about 20 minutes, I went in and I met the director and the producers and the Fox heads and the original cast was there as well.
Wow.
And they had me stand up on a table, and I read the lines, and I remember very distinctly Austin St. John, the original Red Ranger, saying, well, I think we found our Zoltar.
Nice.
And I went home and I got a phone call 2 hours later saying, congratulations, you got the part. Here's where you show up for the shoot. And are you okay if we shave all your hair off?
You're like, yeah, fuck it. All right, let's go for it.
That other man that was in that casting room was Robert De Niro.
I was, no,
I'm joking. I don't know.
You beat me to that because I was going to say it was Patrick Stewart.
Well, funny thing is, the recording studio where we recorded the lines was also the same studio where they were recording lines for The Next Generation. So I passed them going in the elevator a couple times. So
and that's funny because I wanted to make sure that Generations were still going on, so I looked it up on IMDb. Like they finished in '94. And Power Rangers was in '93, so I was like, "Yep, Patrick Stewart. He was trying to get his next job, so he was going in there to get that voiceover, man." Oh.
But I remember how big the Power Rangers hit the U.S. market.
It blows me away, man. It blows me away that it's still going on today. And I have a 4-year-old son that is now into the Power Rangers. He watches the first season, the original, like the ones you guys were on. And it just blows me away that my 4-year-old kid is like into something, like that I would watch or something along those lines,
I mean, they really captured lightning in a bottle with that thing. I mean, it's at the time when they described the show to me, I was fairly excited about it because I grew up watching Ultraman and Spectreman and
I was gonna say Ultraman, man.
Yeah, kaiju, the Godzilla and the monsters. So when they were talking about big giant robots fighting rubber monsters, I'm like, oh, that is awesome. That is so cool. So I kind of, dug the vibe of the show from the get-go. Unfortunately, my experience with it was really kind of bittersweet because after we had finished the day of filming, they said, well, we'll call you if the show gets picked up. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to hold my breath because the standard, line in Hollywood is that, there's 100 pilots filmed during pilot season and 3 or 4 of them get picked up. So I didn't understand how close they were to the Fox kids and how really close they were to sealing the deal. I was just sort of like, I was just an unknown actor who was doing, his job and got paid my day player rate and went home and wasn't really privy to all the stuff that was going on behind the scenes. So I was very surprised and happy, 3 weeks later when they called and said, hey, congratulations, the show's being picked up. I'm like, great, fantastic. When do I show up to film? And they're like, oh, well, we're not going to film you anymore. So they basically took all the footage that we filmed on that one day and basically treated it the same way they did with the Japanese footage. They just recycled it from episode to episode. And from a business standpoint, it's incredibly smart that they got that footage and then were able to use it for 5 or 6 seasons and never had to pay anybody for it. And from an actor's standpoint, it sucked really hard.
Yeah, it sucks, dude.
But at the same time, I remember going over to a friend's house that first morning that it aired and seeing my name pop up in the credits and was just, giddy like a school kid.
Oh, yeah.
When I saw that. But at the same time, I felt very disconnected from the show. I didn't feel like I was a part of it because I would only get called in like every 5 or 6 weeks to do voiceovers. And we would record 3 or 4 episodes at a time, whatever they had finished in the can. And I was never on set with any of the guys. I never really met them and hung out with them and spent any time with them until 20 years later, until 2014 when we started doing comic conventions and stuff.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you if you did a lot of cons or you like to do them,
Well, I mean, around 2011, after Facebook kind of blew up, I would get a message every now and then from somebody saying, "Hey, were you the guy that was Zordon on Power Rangers?" And I said, "Oh yeah." And that's sort of what it was for me. I mean, it was sort of like a nice little anecdote that I could tell people at parties. It's like, "Oh yeah, I was on a kids' television show," and they'd go, "Oh wow." And I didn't even know that the show was still going on. I had been too busy, working in video games and
basically being awesome. Yeah, we established.
Right. We knew that.
And so I was like, oh wow, that show's still going on, and I actually had to do some research and figure out what was going on with the show because in 2011 I got asked to be a part of Tekka Showcon, which is an anime convention that takes place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and
yes.
That was the first time that I sat up on stage in front of an audience of people and understood how much the character and how much the show meant to these people. And it was rather humbling and surprising to me to hear the stories of people who were either latchkey kids or they came from a broken home, and Power Rangers really sort of got them through some really dark times.
Yeah.
And so that was very eye-opening for me to learn about that. And then that was the only con I did for like 3 years. And then in 2014, Scott Zillner, who owns Power Morphicon, which is the big Power Rangers convention that happens every 2 years out in California, he contacted me and asked me if I would like to be a part of Power Morphicon that year. And I said, I'd love to. I can't afford to fly myself up and put myself in a hotel. And he's like, oh no, we'll take care of that. And that was my first thinking of like, oh, well, I didn't realize that. That conventions would fly people out.
Would help you out, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, wow, I'm nobody. Why would you do anything like that for me? And that was the first time that I got to see the real Power Rangers fandom and how passionate and how big it is. And
that must have been weird.
It was very weird because at that time I was very uncomfortable with how everything worked at a convention, and so I was contacted by the group No Hate to participate as part of their photo shoot that was going on at the convention that year, and I asked them if I could get a donation box to put on my table, so that if anybody gave me money for an autograph or whatever, it would just go into that box and I would give it to the No Hate campaign. And that's also the year that I met my agent, who then started booking me into these shows and sort of like gave me not really a knock upside the head, but really sort of like a tap on the shoulder and said, you know what, this is really sort of the residuals that you should have gotten from the show. So don't feel bad about people wanting to give you money for an autograph or something. That's something that they want. That's something that's precious to them. So be grateful that they want to do that, and just consider it as payment for services that you did 25 years ago. So
right.
Yeah. Amazing.
That's sort of how I look at it now, and I'm so very grateful to be a part of this worldwide pop culture phenomenon that allows me to travel to different countries and to meet people from all over the world and sort of share their stories and understand that, we're all much more alike than we are different. And to me, that was really sort of like why I think the show was really popular, is that it took this diverse group of kids that had this message of, hey, we're all in this together and we're friends and we're have each other's backs. And that's I think
it was so.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people I meet at conventions that are in these, big, huge franchises like Halloween and Friday the 13th and sort of stuff. And we all have our different likes and dislikes, and what grabs us and what doesn't grab us. And some of those things I find are, they're really cool and stuff, but at the end of the day, it's about cutting people up and stabbing people. And is that really sort of the message that you want to, even though, my book is urban horror or whatever, and we can talk about that in a little bit, but I mean,
Sure.
The Power Rangers really is, I mean, you can look at it one way as sort of like this, rated G with extra cheese, as Karen Ashley says, this product that's very simple and cheesy on the surface, but underneath, if you really look at it, it really does have this great message of inclusion and support and friendship, and it's just very cool to be a part of it.
That's what the show was, really. It was more the message than anything else. It was when I was watching it. When I remember watching it, I always thought it was like, well, this is cool, because at the time, which was great, it was great timing on their part, because the concept of ninjas was really huge. Everybody wanted to be a ninja.
Yeah, Ninja Turtles were everywhere. That was like
Ninja Turtles were coming out. Yeah. So you had this, and then all of a sudden you had, what are these, rainbow space ninjas? This is awesome. What's going on here? So, and then flooding the market with all that stuff was crazy.
Yeah, that concept really started like in the late 70s with Chuck Norris and the Octagon and the ninja movies that came out in the 80s, which then bled over into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and G.I. Joe, with Snake Eyes, and they all had these ninja movies and stuff. And so I think the natural progression, that Americans were really sort of ready and primed for the Japanese Sentai stuff, where we have these kids in bright costumes who were jumping about and kicking each other, and they had bows and arrows and swords and axes and all this other kind of stuff to fight off these big rubber monsters or big giant purses or whatever it was for the so I think they were right. Like I said, it was lightning in a bottle. It was at the right moment at the right time, and they, as the it was all about the toys. They had a ready-made line of toys ready and waiting to go, and they made $1 billion that first year.
And I got to say that when I came from a small town, and when they were really promoting the toys, there was a store called it was a department store in my area. It was called Hills, and they had the, I'm sure it wasn't the cast, but they had the Power Rangers show up at the mall.
Nice.
To do the promotions, like, hey, we're the Mighty Morphin, that whole thing that they used to do. They don't do that type of stuff anymore, but they would come up in the mall, and there's the Power Rangers, and the music's playing, and everybody runs onto the stage, and they're talking good messages, and they're fighting the bad guys that everybody was kung fu fighting, and the whole thing going on. Yeah. And then they got some kids up on the stage, right? And they were talking to the kids, and it was all about good messages, and the parents were there, and KB Toys and all these other toy places were there, and they're like, we have the whole line of the Power Rangers stuff, and it was really great. So I never told you this story, Wayne. I don't think. Maybe I did. I don't know.
No, you didn't. You haven't told me this one.
I didn't? Okay. Well, I'm on the stage, one of the kids on the stage, and the everybody's, again, all the Power Rangers are going to defend us from the bad guys, the bad ninja people that are coming up on the stage, right? So they're grabbed and they kind of block, and they're doing the blocks and they're doing the kicks and everything like this. Well, the Pink Ranger on stage turned, and I moved, and I got clocked. I had a full face clock. I mean, I got hit, and I went down, and the whole audience went, "Oh!" And everybody was like, "Oh!" And I know you could hear their minds go, "Shit, what just happened?" And I popped back up, and I went, "I'm okay." And they're like, "Yay, we're not going to get sued." And everybody was happy. And but I got a whole big thing of toys because of that. And I had a bunch of Power Ranger stuff.
That's awesome.
It was a good day. I walked out of there with a bunch of Power Ranger stuff.
I have an interesting question, and then there are some friends out there that would kill me if I did not ask this question. But do you feel when the Power Rangers came out, okay, or when the show hit? I know you said you weren't really at the shows or anything like that, but do you feel that when the Power Rangers came out, it was the death of Saturday morning cartoons?
Interesting question, because at the time that we were doing the show, or when I was in the recording booth with these guys, my thought was the show would last a couple of years, like Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, and then it would disappear and nobody would ever hear anything. Because at that time, the only conventions that were out were like the Star Trek conventions. There wasn't there wasn't Comic-Con or anything like that. So there wasn't any sort of like second life after the show or whatever. And not really being a part of the production, not really seeing how everything was being stitched together, not being privy to, you know, the 3-year plan or whatever they had for it, the marketing or whatever. I just assumed that it would fade after time, that nobody would think of it. But I think there are a number of things, a number of factors that led to the death of Saturday morning cartoons, and I think a lot of that has to do with cable and the Cartoon Network and Adult Swim and stuff like that started to do animation in prime time rather than just in the mornings or for kids having specials or whatever.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying with that. Yeah, I can see that.
The other thing I wanted to point out during that great little story about being at the mall was you talked about the music, and I think the music of Power Rangers it is responsible for 1/3, if not 1/2, of the success of that show. Ron Wasserman and the guys that put the music together for that show did such an amazing job of, you know, capturing that electrified rock, that opening theme. Everybody jumps up and, you know, becomes a ninja whenever they hear that.
You're right.
Sure, because it had that vibe of, because we were so used to, I mean, in my generation, so used to having that what is it, the not Schoolhouse Rock, what was it, you know what I'm talking about, Wayne, with the stories after, it was like high school type. They always had electric guitar and there was always stories, but I can't remember what they called it.
3-2-1 Contact, maybe.
No. It was a after school specials. That's what they were called.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But they always had that electric rock theme music that was coming in, and that theme music always reminded me of that. And I was like, well, that really gets you hyped up. It was just well done. And I think you're right. I think that music was great. That added a lot to it.
Oh, if the music wasn't there, I guarantee it wouldn't have hooked half the people, because I mean that really. When I first heard the theme, that's what kind of drug me into watching the show.
Yeah. I mean, the Go-Go Power Rangers, that's an earworm that any 5-year-old can just grasp onto.
Exactly.
And just repeat ad nauseum, you know, just Go-Go Power Rangers. And so, I mean, it was just really...
I find out my 4-year-old plays that at daycare, and the teacher's like, I got to stop the boys from beating the hell out of each other because they play Power Rangers.
Yeah, there was a lot of angry adults. I mean, they actually had to do like a number of PSAs. The actors had to like do these PSAs where they would tell kids, you know, to tone things down and and to try not to be violent. And in the original pilot that they shot, there's a lot of kicks to the head and contact shots that the guys were doing with the stunt guys. That
I know, I felt it.
Yeah, the studio. Yeah, right there in the mall. But the studio heads came back and said, you can't do that anymore. You can't do any more kicks to the head, because parents were complaining about broken lamps and broken windows, black eyes and stuff like that. So, they had to tone that down. But
that's amazing.
A bunch of wieners.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember coming up as a kid. My mom, I'd watch like Dukes of Hazzard or some shit on TV and go outside with my big wheel bicycle and try to jump a ramp like an idiot.
Yeah.
He still does it.
I do still do it. I still have my big wheel.
Me growing up, I was all about Evel Knievel, and that guy was all
Hell
about
yeah.
no safety net, all danger,
all broken bones.
Oh yeah, I was always looking for a ditch that I could jump over. I was like, do that.
He's like the Caucasian Jackie Chan.
Right,
awesome.
right. He did his own stunts, except Jackie Chan, he made most of his.
Yeah.
Evel Knievel, he fell a lot.
Oh, we won't mention Snake Canyon.
No, don't do that.
Well, let's get back to your books. I know you've done other things. You've done the video games and everything, and
which is very cool, because we're huge video game guys. Actually,
video game.
That's how the show actually became. It got its birth. It was me and Justin met each other playing video games. We're playing Halo Live, and that's how we met, and that's how we became. And that's been 9 years for the show, and me and him been knowing each other for like 15 years now. So
yeah, it's crazy. But the books, I'm interested in this because they're. Would you say the book is? Would you say it's a teen horror? Or is it everybody kind of a? What genre would you call the book? I mean, when it came for like age range, does it for any age?
I think it's geared toward the higher end of the young adult. I mean, it a young adult and adult. I mean, when I was writing it, trying to, emulate my heroes like Stephen King and Dean Koontz and Clive Barker. Mm-hmm. So there's a fair amount of profanity in it. There's some very nasty situations. So I wouldn't place it, directly into the young adult market, but I mean, anybody who's like the age of 16 and above is probably okay.
Okay.
I classify it as sort of like urban paranormal.
Okay.
It's not fantasy, which is interesting because when I was growing up and I was reading a lot, I read a lot of fantasy books. I read a lot of adventure books of elves and knights and swords and dragons and all that kind of stuff, and that was my bread and butter for like a good 15 years. And then at some point I stopped reading all of that, and I still enjoy fantasy. I still like the idea of a quest and people taking a journey to take on a big evil. I just don't know if I believe in it anymore.
I gotcha.
And I think maybe that's just my being an adult and seeing the world change over the last 20 years, really drastically change over the last 20 years, and how unsafe everybody feels. And so I write a lot of very dark stuff now because that's the kind of world that we live in. And the guys that used to watch Power Rangers when they were little, whenever they talk about Power Rangers now, they're very interested in sort of this dark, gritty, and almost bloody version of Power Rangers that doesn't really exist. There's been like a lot of fan fiction and fan films that have been done that are really dark and gritty. And if you saw the Power Slash Rangers that Adi Shankar, the producer, did with Joseph Kahn, the director, That's a really dark and gritty version of Power Rangers.
Is that the last one, the 2019 one?
That's no 2017 is the one that the studios did.
They did that one, yeah.
The Adi Shankar Joseph Kahn one came out, I think, a year before that.
Yeah, it was a short though, wasn't it?
It's only like 15 minutes long. It's not that long.
Oh, okay.
It's incredible. Don't get me wrong. It is incredible, but yes, it is super violent and very nuts.
When you first watch it, you're like going, "Oh, this is really cool," and it has the production values. It has the Joseph Kahn is really good with the camera.
There's some money behind it, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was done really well, but it's not Power Rangers. It's a through the looking glass Power Rangers. It's very dark, because it has drug use and so forth and so on. And
I see we do see a lot of that change in the TV when they say, hey, we're bringing they're going to bring this back, and you're like, oh, awesome, and all of a sudden it's everything seems to be very dark universe.
It's society though, man. I think it's a lot of society's issues.
But well, I mean, as a society, we get more sophisticated in our ability to tell stories and how we present those stories to each other. The films that I grew up watching look quaint today compared to the way that films are done now.
Most definitely.
Because like if you had taken the MCU and put it, back in the 70s, those things would have been really cheesy and hard to watch. And
they are if you go back and watch some of them.
Plus
but
they have that music.
The filmmaking techniques, the way stories are told, audiences their expectation level has sort of like expounded, and they expect a certain level of
evil.
Not necessarily evil, much more believability.
Yeah.
Believability. I'll give you that.
They want a lot more reality with their fantasy films or whatever. They want to think that because that was one of the things that was very interesting about Iron Man when it first came out in 2008. When you look at that movie, you're like going, yeah, I could actually see this actually happening. If somebody actually had the resources and the technology, they could build a suit like that, and they've done it.
They've done it.
So that's the really twist on it. If you go back and you look at some of those really cheesy superhero movies from like the 70s and 80s, it's all green screen. It's all so fake. Even though I love Flash Gordon to death, I think it's one of my favorite films of all time. You look at it and you're like, this is not real. It's a cartoon come to life. But you look at the stuff that's come out since like 2008, and it's all very real. It's all very believable. It could take place at any time, and you can see that reflected in real life as well, because parkour, the ability to move across a space efficiently and as quickly as possible. That's street level superhero stuff. And the longer that you see people do that, the longer you see people push their bodies, the more that's possible, the more that's going to happen. And, I keep wondering, every day, why don't we see one of these guys in a suit on the news, taking care of business? But
yeah,
they made that movie. It was called Kick-Ass.
Yeah, they did Kick-Ass, and he also did one called Super. If you haven't seen that one, yeah, Super Super was a messed up movie though. I mean, I enjoyed it, but it was it was hard to watch.
See, that's another part of the dark aspect of what you're going into, because since Tim Burton's Batman. Anytime you talk about Batman, it's always about the split personality. It's always about the mental issues, and the psychological, psychic. Why do these people do these things? Why is it okay for somebody to put on all that stuff and then run around and beat people up?
I really do miss the quaintness and the when you mentioned the older movies where like comic books come to life. Yeah. I think that at that time, that's what it wasn't just it was more of a way of getting people into it. It's like, oh, I've read the comic. Oh, I get it. Yeah, I can see it now. It's like watching the comic
And it was
live.
and it was
I
mostly
get
like
it.
good-heartedness in those things too. I mean, they had
Yeah,
the bad guys and this and that, but like I mean, look at the Batman TV show with the villains. That they were all silly goofballs, and then you go back and look at, and then you go into even with the Tim Burton movies, the villains weren't as bad as they are in like The Dark Knight Rises and
Go back and watch Batman Returns with Michelle Pfeiffer and Danny DeVito, and look at it with fresh eyes, and you'll see, wow, this is a really dark movie.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. I understand, especially when I mean, what is it? That Paul Rubens, Pee Wee Herman throws the baby in the damn ditch.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
but still, there was that aspect of it being a little bit more
campy
comic book,
Yeah,
a little bit more cartoon, because the characters looked. I mean, the Penguin looked like the Penguin was supposed to,
Yeah,
not like the Penguin in Gotham.
right. I mean, that's when you really start to see things start to change as far as stories, how stories are told in film, because up until like the mid '80s, a lot of films were still shot the same way they were shot in the 30s and 40s, which was like, we're going to film a stage play, and there are over the shoulder shots, there are straight on shots, there are two shots. It's all very static. The camera stays very still. But as you move through the late 80s and through the 90s, you start to see the camera starting to become much more of a participant in the storytelling. And that changes how scripts are written. That changes how actors' performances are done. It's all grown up, and that's where we are today. With the audiences are expecting their stories to be grown up. They want a certain level of, I can believe this.
Now, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Wayne.
I was gonna say, I find that it started. I'm sure I'm wrong. It probably started prior to this, but when I was watching shows like Firefly and the new version of what is it, Battlestar Galactica? Yeah, and they did those camera flares and things that they were doing with the cameras that were different from most other shows. I find that it started to really amp up what they did in in films.
Sure.
Once those guys started doing that kind of stuff, like it almost feels like the camera's always moving. Blair Witch kind of constant movement, but not like that. You know what I mean? Like it's weird.
Person-esque.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what the filmmaking or film watching experience is going to be like in 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And how much VR is going to influence that, and are you actually going to be inside the movie? So that if you go watch Blade Runner 2049, are you actually walking around inside Kay's apartment? And
wow,
and, that's going to be very interesting to see how that's done. So.
Now, and going back to your writing, and we've been talking about movies, when you're visualizing, writing these stories down, do you see them in your head like a movie, or is it more? You do? Okay.
I mean, I have a tendency, and I think maybe it's not necessarily the best tendency, but I write very cinematically. I write what I would like to see, and I try to describe things in a very sort of cinematic way. I try to paint a picture that people can actually see, and so yes, the answer to your question is very much so. Yes.
I think that's that's the way, because I've been writing a book for quite a while now, and that's how I do it. I kind of see it like a movie, but a lot of times the translation from my head to paper, that's the reason why it takes me forever.
I mean,
because my book is very long at this point, and I really have to condense it.
Right. Writing is a very tough job. I mean, it's a very solitary job. You're doing it all by yourself, and any writer will tell you, the agony of sitting in front of a screen and trying to think of the right word to describe this motion or this emotion, or it has to be the right word, and if it's not the right word,
it ruins it.
Yeah, you can't move forward. And I've learned over time that the best thing to do is just to puke it all out and then go back and rework it and go through the second edition, third edition, and really hone it down. But it's
trust me, I'm puking it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken me a really long time to learn not to edit as I write. that I have to just write sentences and get through it and then go back and fix it. And Neil Gaiman, who's an amazing author and has written some amazing stuff, his thing is like, the first draft is basically it's there for you to say, okay, this is what the story is. And then the second draft is when you go back and try to convince everybody that you knew what you were doing all along. That's how I try to look at it. So.
That's
well, this sounds
funny,
like it's
man.
going to be. This is an amazing book. I'm anxious to get my hands on it.
Yeah, me too.
Do you have any? I mean, since we were talking movies, I mean, is this something that maybe later on down the road you would want to, maybe if you had the option to opt to put it into film?
I'd hope so. It sounds good.
I would love to get it in the hands of the right person who would love to option it. That one of my friends is actually the special effects coordinator on the TV show The Magicians, and I
nice.
Love that show.
Yeah.
I gave him a copy of it, and he really liked it, and he is trying to pass it around to people that might read it. So my hope is that it gets in front of the right eyes and they see the potential of it. And because when I gave it to him, my idea was like, oh, I'd love to see this as a movie. And he goes, no, this is a series. I saw this book as a series, like an eight episode series. And I was like going, really? And he goes, yeah. So, I mean, that's the sort of networking that needs to happen in order for something.
Oh yeah.
An independent book like this to sort of like, it's not like Stephen King who can just, write something amazing on a napkin and it becomes a TV. I mean,
hey HBO, look, I got this thing. It's been in my closet for like 6 years, but you want to try to, you can use this. This will be all right.
I was on the crapper and had an idea. Oh, here's $1,000. I'm like, oh, geez,
I was on the crapper. It was called something else, but I think we'll just stick with it.
Yeah, that's it.
So I mean, he's an amazing individual as far as like how prolific, how much stuff he just pumps out is just amazing.
It blows me away. Like I sat down and started reading the Outsiders. My wife bought it for me, and it's an incredible book. I haven't watched the TV show because I didn't know it was a TV show until like recently. And The Outsiders. If you get a chance, read that book. It's really good.
He has such an amazing ability to write these characters that just pull you right in, and you follow them.
They're believable,
Yeah. He is the Nora Roberts of suspense.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
So, do you have any like conventions you're going to in the next after the evacuations and all that stuff is done?
Well, I had 2 events lined up, but of course they canceled because of the quarantine kind of stuff. So, as far as I know, I don't have anything lined up until June or July. So I'm just kind of stuck at home and trying to use the time as creatively as possible. Plus, I play a lot of Red Dead Redemption, so I'm doing.
Really? What system are you playing it on? Are you on specifically PC?
PlayStation 4. Yeah.
Man, all these people, y'all break my heart with this PlayStation thing. We're Xbox guys, man.
Well, I specifically bought the PlayStation because I wanted to play Red Dead Redemption 2 online, and because I bought it, and Mike Jin, who was the Gold Ranger in I forget what season, and Christopher Kamen Lee, who was Andros, who ended up killing Zordon. We all run around in Red Dead Redemption together. And,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so
it's such an amazing game, isn't it?
It's beautiful. I loved it.
Beautifully, the art is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, considering the games and stuff that I was working on in the late 90s and early 2000s, I mean, it's leaps and bounds beyond everything that we ever worked on. So,
I always wanted to. I wish my dad was still around. So like because he was into doing the computer games that were it was basically all words. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
yeah, like choose your own adventure kind of thing. And he would like draw.
Like Zork.
Yeah, but he would draw his own maps and stuff like
Yeah.
as he's playing.
Yeah, he played the muds and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. And I just wish he was still here so I can show him like what. Look at this, like this looks like real people we're playing, man. Like he would go absolutely crazy, especially like doing stuff like I knew my dad and he would have got stuck on like Warcraft. He'd have been one of those guys wearing a diaper.
Well, see, that's the thing that really appeals to me about Red Dead is that it's a massively multiplayer game, but not really. I mean, I love Warcraft. I loved EverQuest, Skyrim. Any of these worlds that are just these big, giant open sandboxes. I love that. Just being able to explore and go wherever I want to. And I had a friend who he played Warcraft, and all he wanted to do was get his druid to level 10 so that he could transform into a bear, climb up to the highest mountain, and sit there and watch the sunset. That's all he wanted to do. That was awesome. That was awesome.
We all have many goals.
That's so good. Oh shit.
Yeah. How much time I took off of work just so I could I don't feel good today. I need to get my undead warrior up. I was like, oh my god, I'm turning into that guy.
Well, hell, dude, my wife is like she's been talking about this damn game for the last month. Okay, Animal Crossing. I don't know what the fuck that is. I have no idea what Animal Crossing is. It's some Nintendo game. I don't know. So she got it a couple days ago, right? Because of course she got the digital download one, so she didn't have to go to the store. So it's cool,
right.
Smart idea. And so now she's been playing it for the last 4 days. And she's like, I built an island already. I got this. I was like, Jesus Christ, man. Did you sleep at all? No.
That's the one thing about gaming, man. It's you either immerse yourself in it or don't do it.
Well,
You got to.
I mean, it's like when the new Gears of War stuff comes out, she knows better than to bother me. Because, I'll go in the room and I will play that game until I beat it. Because I don't want no distractions. I don't want anybody to tell me what happened in the story. I love the storylines, and that's one of my favorite things about that game.
It's amazing how much video games feed our love of stories, because when you run around in these massively multiplayer games, you don't really at least in my experience, you don't really read the text of all the quest assignments. You just go, okay, I've got to go get 5 apples or whatever.
Yeah.
But
right.
it's your story of running and what you did to go get those 5 apples that is, there's 100 different ways, 1 million different ways you can go get those 5 apples, and that's your individual story.
Yeah.
And I think that's the addiction. That's the thing that sucks people in. It's like, this is my story. It's my journey, and we love
my character.
That. Yeah.
Yeah. And
same with Dungeons and Dragons, though, man. Like when you built your character from scratch.
Oh yeah.
And you worked you worked up the levels, and all your friends are trying to get your stuff, and you're building it up through all these.
I tell you, man, I played World of Warcraft, and I was like, man, I really wish the real world was like this, because if I saw somebody with an exclamation point over their head, I would run over them in a heartbeat. Dude, what do you need me to do? And do I get money for that? Dude, I am successful in the world. Pow. I mean, it's
who needs help?
Yeah, I mean, if I ever had like a company, I would make sure that everybody had like an exclamation point over their head. Like, oh, what do you need me to do? 5 copies.
You sound like you play a very lawful, good character in most of your games.
This really kind of rubs me the wrong way, because when I was playing D&D and I was writing stories and being a dungeon master, whenever I would play my character, my friend who was the DM at this time was like, you really are a paladin, you know that, right?
Right.
I hate paladins.
Stop it.
Nobody wants to be the paladin.
I don't want to be him.
Stand back and just heal everybody. You're like, shit, I want to do some damage.
Why can't I?
And then everybody yells at you.
Why do I always have to be lumped as lawful good? Because I try to help people. It's like, oh well, chaotic person going, well, that's not what I'm going to do. And I think that's one of the reasons why I play Red Dead Redemption, because that way I can shoot people in the face.
That's right. That's right.
See,
I'm not telling it now, right?
Man, we gotta try to get an online game going, man, like a Dungeons and Dragons online game with a bunch of people. Like, I think that'd be really fun. I haven't played in a long time, and now they're saying that since we're getting all this lockdown stuff going on, that there's a way to do it now. I posted it on our Facebook page.
Yeah, if you go to Roll20, Roll20 has like this amazing set. It's a website with all these web tools, and you can build a dungeon and take people on adventures, and
I think it's great.
It's paired up with Spotify and Discord, so you can actually talk to people in real time.
Oh man,
it's really, really cool.
Man,
I'll have to check it out.
I think we need to set that up. If we set that up, I'm gonna invite you. So don't think I'm not going to, man.
Okay. All right.
I think it'll be fun. I really do. I think it'll be something interesting to do. MHOG presents.
Well, here's an interesting thing. If in Power Rangers and Dungeons and Dragons, there was a live action show that was happening on Twitch called Hyperforce, and it was a new team of Power Rangers that was jumping through time and helping other Power Rangers and stuff, and that was all live action, and they had guest stars from the show. They had Paul Schreier, who played Bulk. They had Karen Ashley, who played the Yellow Ranger, second Yellow Ranger, Aisha. They had JDF, Jason David Frank, the Green Ranger, and they incorporated some of the Boom Comics storyline from Shattered into it. But it was all basic Dungeons and Dragons rules. They would roll dice to see if they hit and if they made a success and stuff. It was very, very cool. And I was hoping to be a part of it, but because I live in Texas and they live in California, the logistics of it didn't quite work out because they were going to have Zordon there in the last episode, and I was going to make a surprise appearance, but it didn't work out. But hopefully, if Hasbro likes wants to bring it back, that would be another way for people to actually experience not only Power Rangers but also interactive storytelling in D&D.
That's freaking cool. Yeah, that'd be really good. I didn't know that at all.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. Well, it's going to give us something to work on, Wayne, definitely.
I think we've been talking about doing a MHOG game thing, and we were going to do it at the end of this month, but since we can't do it in-house because they say you got to be locked away, so this would be a good idea to really hammer it out and try to do it online. I think that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah. It would be fun. I wish they'd come up with an online version of Munchkin. I love Munchkin.
Yeah, because I got boxes and boxes of that shit, and I've never played it before. Somebody left it at my house.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it wasn't you. It wasn't you. It was funny. It's like they left a bunch of boxes of Munchkin, and I'm going, I don't even know the rules of this game, but I got 50 freaking starter packs here.
Well, anyway, this is great. Well, this has been a great interview.
Yeah, man, it's been really fun.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, we appreciate it. Now, if you don't mind, tell everybody out there who's listening right now all your URLs and everything you've got, and so we can let everybody know, because this is amazing. This is Captain Awesome, also known as Awesome. He's going to tell you his info.
You can find me on Twitter at David J. Fielding. You can find me on Instagram at DJFielding_Zordon. And if you do a search on Facebook for Zordon, my Facebook page for Zordon should come up. So that's all my social media stuff.
Where can they get your book?
The book is right now is hosted on Barnes & Noble. Hopefully it will be on Amazon soon. I'll post the link to you guys so you can put it in the description, so whenever you post the podcast, it'll pop up.
Oh, great.
Terrific.
And I would love for as many people as possible to read it and to give me feedback and to let me know if they liked it or hated it or whatever. So, yeah, that's it.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
So, yeah, all right. So thank you for coming on, David. We really appreciated you, doing our show, man. I
Taking
really
the
did.
time.
Taking your time out and
My pleasure. It was an awesome time. You guys are great to talk to. So thanks for having me on.
Thanks. We appreciate it. So all right, ladies and gentlemen, I was your host, Wayne.
I'm the Rum Guy.
And that was Zordon himself, Mr. David Fielding. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, to keep it
Adieu, parting is such sweet sorrow.
Go ahead and run. Run home and cry to mama.
Get the fuck out!
Okay then. That's it.